Let's go.
Welcome to the Soul Fam podcast, where we expand your personal universe. I'm Diana Marquetta, and in each episode, Soul Fam co-founder, co-creator Lexi Strummer-Solden and I interview the world's most rising and longtime experts in consciousness, spirituality, entertainment, healing, and science. From Earth's dimensions and dimensions way, way beyond. On the Soul Fam podcast, our frequencies are high and your heart chakras will open as these powerful voices of today share cutting-edge research, profound experiences, and valuable knowledge for your world in this out-of-this-world, thought-provoking, envelope-pushing interviews that could only take place right here on the Soul Fam podcast. We invite you to join the Soul Fam podcast, already in progress, with Kristen Kosinski. Kristen, former executive at Paramount Television and director of the nonprofit organization, the Samburu Project in Kenya, that built wells for more than 100,000 people. Kristen is a life consultant, an entrepreneur, and someone who helps you make your dreams come true. Please join us now. So you were saying when you're more ethereal, we need to do more grounding work?
Yeah. And I myself am a double Gemini and my moon is in Aquarius. So I need to ground a lot. I get to ground a lot.
A lot of air.
Yeah. So, in some ways, having all that air is my superpower, right? Because I'm in all the dimensions. And to succeed on this earthly plane, I have to ground myself. I have to get connected to Mother Earth. In fact, it's funny. I was having I did a reading with one of my clients. She did a reading for me. And that was like everything that came out. She's like, you need to ground more to the earth. Like she was suggesting, putting water out at night and to get the moon energy and drinking that all day, or putting that in a tea, going down to the beach and walking in the sand and the water. So I think everybody probably could benefit from more grounding in general. Especially in the work that I do in terms of vision work. We create a vision, and the vision is connected to spirit, because the vision is the answer to the question, what would I love? And love is spirit, right? Spirit is truth and love. My work, we talk about realms. The first realm, if we're in a healthy place and we're adjusted, we're in order, it starts with spirit, the spiritual realm. And that's the answer to truth and love. So we ask that question, what would I love? And we create this, beautiful vision for our life. And then we have to come back to earth and ground that. So we ground it in our calendars by writing it down, by committing to it, we have to do practices that really put it back into the earth plane, because we're humans, spiritual beings having a human experience.
Backing this up a little bit for our Soul Fam audience, as we record this, it's not live. Backing into this conversation, Kristen is a life coach, an entrepreneurial coach, and she has a special blend coaching that involves working with the spiritual realms and, as she just said, bringing it down to earth so that it can manifest in a very physical, real way. And I was sharing how I went through one of her recent Zoom calls with a number of other clients, and she made it very, very real for me, where I really struggle with very creative, high-minded ideals and ideas in a very high-dimensional sort of way, and almost futuristic. And it's difficult for me to feel grounded and have a sense of, one, exactly what it is I want, need, and am supposed to be doing. And then two, how to move that forward. So backing into this conversation, this is what we're talking about right now. And I'm really dying to learn more. Kristen is a former Paramount executive on the television side. Is that correct?
Yes.
Which sounds like a dream life. So then she managed to go on to her next dream life with work in Kenya, creating the Samburu Project, which potable water to villages, correct?
Yes.
And how many people do you feel that you've probably affected through that?
The organization to date has drilled 100 plus wells, maybe 150. And the estimation was that a well would provide clean drinking water for about 1,000 people. So you do the math. Over 100,000.
Now you're back in the United States. Could you share with us exactly what you're up to?
Yeah. So as you said, I'm a coach and a consultant, and I work with my clients to realize their dreams. And the reason that I do that actually is because of the work that I did in Kenya. So when I was working at Paramount as a television executive, I was doing a lot of personal development work. I've always been a seeker. And while I was in that work and doing the work, in fact, I was reading a book. I was reading The Artist's Way. And as I was going through that book, I had a memory of a dream that I had as a little girl, which was this dream to work with African women, be with African women, commune with African women. Since I was a little girl, I had this vision. And as I went through my life, I got a lot of naysaying around that vision. So I was like, I'm not going to college. I'm going to go to Africa. And my family was like, what are you talking about? I grew up in Pittsburgh in the 80s. They were like, that's not happening. And so then I went to college, and I went to Penn State, and then I was like, I'm going to go to Africa after this. And I sort of aligned my college resume with things that would get me into the Peace Corps, because I had decided that in the early 90s that was the way I could get to Africa. And then, things changed, and I ended up jumping into a program in the US called Teach for America. They were promoting it like a domestic Peace Corps. And my life, I was in Houston for a while, and then I ended up in LA, and I forgot about my vision. I forgot about my dream. It went by the wayside. Here I was, an executive at Paramount, because I thought that what I was supposed to do eventually was to get into the entertainment business, because at the time, as a young woman, it seemed like that's what everybody did in Los Angeles. I jumped into that and grew a career at Paramount, started as an assistant, became an executive. And my soul was not feeling it. It did not feel like it was my soul's purpose. It felt really the opposite of that, soul sucking. It was my soul was dying, even though there was a lot of amazing things about it. Like, there was a lot of amazing things about that experience, and incredible people that I met and got to work with. But it was not why I felt I was called to this planet at this time. And so when I was doing this work, I had this memory of like, oh my lands, I'm supposed to go to Africa and be with us. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. And up until that time, I had already done a lot of work on myself, dealt with a lot of past traumas. And so it was very clear. And so then I started holding this, and I had this vision of going to Africa. And so I planned a trip to Kenya. And this was in 2005. And in the meantime, long story, which I won't get into, I ended up leaving Paramount before I went to Africa. And then I was just like, okay, here it goes. And literally, 3 days into my trip, I went to Kenya. Felt like that was a user-friendly place for me to go. Like, I knew some people. I was like, I can do this. I'm going to do some exploration. And really, 3 days into my trip, I was sitting in a village in a hut in northern Kenya in a place called Samburu. And I was in my vision. I was literally, it was probably the most profound moment of my life, because I was in the past, present, and future all at the same time. I was sitting in the vision that I had seen as a little girl. Like, still to this day, like, I say that and my entire body has chills. So what became of that day, because I thought I was going to do a documentary or something with women. I didn't know that I was going to start a nonprofit organization. However, I learned that day that, the biggest struggle that these women have was the issue with water and the lack of access to water. And although I wanted to maybe get into something more sexy, like female genital mutilation, I felt like we had to address the water issue first. So that launched a long journey in Samburu, where I met hundreds and hundreds of women, kept hearing the same story. Cut to, I started a nonprofit. And when I started doing that work, and I was really living this incredible dream, I was communing with these women. I was part of their lives. I was doing this incredible service to support them and their families, their children. I had this realization. I was like, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Of course.
Of course.
Okay.
We encourage it.
Awesome. I was like, holy shit. like, I'm living my fucking dream. Like, I'm in my dream. I'm in my dream. Like, this is I had a dream. I held on to it for a while, went dormant. I remembered my dream. And then like I had, you know, by like some amazing grace of God, like the guts to like say yes to it and, travel 10,000, leave my job, travel 10,000 miles away, show up in Samburu, Kenya, end up in this village in the Samburu Game Reserve in a place called Kiltamani, and like be with these women and like be like to have the amazing experience of like actually living my dream. And then like the bonus of it was that like it ended up being this thing where I was doing good stuff in the world. Like that was even the bonus. So when I realized that I got to do that, I was like, holy shit, like I want to help other people do the same.
So did it
That's
feel
why
surreal?
Yes and no. Like it was absolutely surreal. And then it was like right on time. Like it was both. It was both and like it was so the reason I tell that story is, how do I get to do what I do now? I did run the Samburu Project, the nonprofit that came out of that, that meeting that day when I learned about the lack of water. I ran that organization for 10 and a half years. And what I realized that my next thing was to help other people have those holy shit moments.
Well, we could have some holy shit moments. I'd like that.
Right, yeah, baby, bring it on.
There's a lot. I'm a Gemini moon, and I feel like there's a lot of holy shit moments like, oh, wouldn't this be so great if I wrote this novella about an obscure, this, that, or the other. I think that the interests of a lot of people, including myself, are so varied and just so vast that it's hard to hone in on what is the most important and profound holy shit moment of what it is I should be doing. I mean, it is for me. Do you help people sort of navigate that?
Yes, it really is. There's a lot of inquiry in that. But when we begin to write our visions, we really start with that question, what would I love?
Do you ever have to tell people to stop writing visions? Like, okay, you've been writing visions for like 3 weeks. You've got to stop. That's enough.
No, actually, what's always astounds me, not only with other people, with myself up until now, is the resistance that we have to writing our visions.
What do you mean resistance?
Not doing it, putting it off, delaying it. The paradigms come up and it's like, not doing it. I mean, I have clients that sign on with me to, build their dreams. And it's like, we're 3 weeks in. I'm like, are you going to get me that vision or what? What's going on?
So what pushes people to finally do that? I mean, I feel like, golly, I've been working for my vision my whole life. And then when I went through this life assessment intake that we did on your call, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I have been, but I've not really been clear about it, which I think I am, but no, you're not. So how does that all work for everyone?
That's part of the work, is really holding people accountable on some level, just to do like choose something, make a choice, choose something. And the cool thing is about vision work is that you don't choose something today and then like you can never like choose something again, because the thing about vision is that we create our vision from our current level of awareness. And our awareness, if we are people that are open to becoming more and more aware with each and every moment of each and every day, our current level of awareness changes. And then therefore the vision might change too.
So when you were in Africa, were you sure that you were on mission and that you'd been sent on a mission and you were realizing your mission?
100%. No doubt about it.
You weren't some lost girl just running around in Kenya trying to figure things out.
I mean, I might have done a little bit of that too. I got some stories that I'm not going to share on this podcast.
Good time.
There was definitely some adventure that happened. Beyond the Samburu stuff, because I have multiple parts, for sure. That's a different podcast. But yes, in doing the work, it was so, from the beginning till the end. And in fact, I just went back to Kenya for the first time since 2014. I hadn't been there in 8 years. I had another dream and vision to take my son, who was 14 years old, to Kenya and see the work that I did there. Because when he was a young child, I was going to Kenya, and he was staying with my family. There was times where our family, had to make choices, and it affected him. And I don't necessarily, not in a negative way, but it was part of our life story. And I really wanted him to see in person, like, the impact and the work and the place that I had talked about, with him for so many years. And so I got to take him back. So not only in that time that I was actually running the Sunbrew Project as the, executive director and founder, but even up until this last visit that I took my son, and my niece came with me too. It's a really, it's a place that is so close to my heart and so deeply connected, such deep connected relationships with people without really even knowing them on some level. It's just a place of real connection for me.
And how did both of them take it? Is your niece about the same age?
No, she's 23, just turned 24, actually. She was flabbergasted. She was like, oh my gosh, because we had all these crazy stories. Like, people would follow us and be like, oh my gosh, like, I have to talk to you, Kristen, and like tell me amazing stories about how the work that I did there really impacted their lives in the most extraordinary way, because it's been so long. I mean, we did our first well in 2006. How long ago was that? 10 plus 17 years ago. So there were like young men who would come up and be like, I was a little boy when you drilled a well in my community, and let me tell you what happened. My niece was like, oh my God. And like, the guy's name would be like Peter Pan. My niece was like, oh my gosh, Peter Pan's story was amazing. Or just seeing it. Because it's definitely an alternative reality. It's nothing. There's nothing like it, the place that it is. And so, and the people and the culture there is so rich and so vastly different than, our lives, in this world, in the United States. And so my son, he's a little too cool for school right now. So he was a little less, I think more for him, he was like, why are we here? Like, the culture shock of it was a bit much for him. And then at the same time, I had these moments where I, captured like a scene of him, talking to some kids at a well or pumping the water, or that he really was like, taking it in on a deep level. And I know that the impact will have a ripple effect for him, for sure. Yeah.
As a boy mom,
I answered your question.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as a boy mom, my sense is, not to give my son away, but they sort of learn backwards in a way. Like, a year from now, he'll say, wow, Mom, that really, had a significant impact on me, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's very cool. I know we're going back to Samburu, but I'm just curious. So what if a boy came up and, who was a little kid when you dug a well in his town, what are the stories he would tell?
The family didn't struggle, that they had water, that they had food, that he was able to go to school, that, his mother didn't have to spend, and sisters didn't have to spend their days walking for water, that the sisters got to go to school, like everything. I mean, their whole lives changed because of the water in their communities. Every single aspect of their lives, from like health to relationships to education.
We can barely get
that's
to
why we start with, right. I mean, that's why we start with water, right? Like, they say water is life. There's a reason why they say water is life, because without it, it's impossible. And it really, when water is not readily available, and then the water that is available is not healthy to drink, people's lives are just crippled by it.
I was going to ask if water scarcity has always been an issue in that region, or if there was something specific that sort of contributed to those circumstances, or is this just sort of a drought region? I've never been to Kenya. I haven't really been outside the United States other than a couple places, so I don't know. Is water scarcity, it's just a common problem all over the world? Is that right? Or is it specific?
Well, specifically in Samburu, it's an arid from a climate perspective, it's arid. Because of climate change, it's more arid. There's less rain, or when there is rain, there's too much of it, and there's a lot of flooding and flash flooding and things like that. So, climate plays a part in it. And then also it's a much bigger political conversation. It's,
Right.
When Africa was colonized, the tribal people lost their ability to live nomadic. And so then suddenly, the Samburu people, I always sort of liken the area that they live as sort of like it's not, but like a reservation, right? Like they get to live in a certain area, but these are people that are pastoralists. So what they do is they travel to fresh water and grazing pastures for their livestock. And so, prior to colonization, there was more freedom of movement. And so they could go more places. But in, the colonial era and post-colonial era, they became sequestered to a certain area of land that has been overgrazed, that doesn't have the water that does that make sense?
Completely. Yeah. Sounds familiar too.
Yeah.
We're starting to experience that here in California. So That's really interesting. Did you get a lot of pushback from people about pursuing this?
Oh yeah. That was one of your questions. And I was like, yeah, a lot. I think I'm definitely a little more out there, or a lot more out there than many of my family members. And they were like, what the fuck are you doing? Seriously? Like, you worked so hard to like get, climb the ladder at Paramount. You have this amazing job. Like, people will kill for this job. Like, how are you leaving the job and starting this? And, my dad, God rest his soul, he died in 2015. And by the way, he's one of the reasons why I left the December Project. I could tell you that story later. But when I was starting the project, he was an attorney, and I was like, Dad, you can help me do the incorporation, like all that. Like, I wanted to, engage him. And he was like, who's going to give you any fucking money? That's great. That is a crazy idea. Why would you ever do that? Like, it's crazy. And so there was a lot of that, a whole lot of that. I had a lot of naysayers. Yeah, because, and I understand it, they were just in fear. And so thank God that goes back to vision. So if we're not really clear about our vision, we don't have a lot of passion for it, we will get sidelined by the naysayers, because that's what the naysayers are, just the voices in our own head. We have to really get vigilant about our work around our vision and get really clear about the steps that we're taking, even if, and then stop talking to people who are not in alignment with that. Like, then you just don't, you can be nice, but you don't tell them about your vision, because it does further complicate the process when we do that. I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah, I think Lexi and I have probably both experienced that, and that, part of SoulFam is a new pursuit for us. We both work in the entertainment business as well. And certainly it seems like it would be something that is sort of parallel to what we do. But I know I have certainly gotten a lot of pushback for pursuing it.
No, I was just saying I'm two people. I'm like a corporate lovable, agent type. And then I'm also a tarot loving weirdo. So people are like, yeah, they're like, oh, are you sure? Like, you want to put that out there, that you like tarot cards and you believe in reincarnation and you're totally open to the whole alien thing? I'm like, well, I think COVID hit, and Diana and I were like, you know what? Who cares at this point? I am who I am. I've worked for my son bosses for a decade plus, to the point where I was giving them crystals and sage clearing books for birthdays. They know who I am. So
and they love you for that.
Yeah. So why not just try? It can't hurt, but that doesn't mean that people won't try to talk you out of it. Not because they're always trying to be nasty about it or competitive, but sometimes they're just really afraid that your dreams are going to get crushed, So it's hard to sort of placate them and say, no, I appreciate it. I'm going to be okay. Like, thank you. I mean, how do you tell those people nicely to fuck off?
Well, and I want to say, I think they're actually afraid of their dreams getting crushed, so that is projecting it onto you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because what if we turn out to be right? God forbid.
It's so funny that you say that, because when I was at Paramount, I mean, I was definitely like an outlier, because I was doing like all this work, and like some of it, there's a lot of it, like my background in terms of my personal development started with really deep, amazing emotional processing, which is work that I bring to my clients still. It's my foundation. And then I was doing like all kinds of like women's circles and like crystals. And I mean, I was like, there was all kinds of shit happening. And I was like way into it and still am. So I would like be in the office and I was this, like, hi. And like, I think I didn't push my stuff on people, but like, I think vibrationally, I tell this to people all the time, because I'm like, when I was at Paramount, like they never promoted anybody, but I got promoted. Okay. Like nobody got promoted and I got promoted. Yeah. I got promoted and, I was like, why are they promoting me? And then I realized looking back, I'm like, cause I was like good vibes. Like you wanted me to be around. Like not because I have more of a special power for good vibes than anybody else, but I was doing my work. And so when I was showing up at the office, my energy was clean, clear, bright. Cause I was like, by the way, on the way to the office, driving down the 10 freeway in my BMW convertible, like screaming, yelling, crying, like doing my fuck yous, like so that I could show up and be like, I'm here. I've arrived. I would do all my processing. Like everybody got killed on the way down the freeway. And this is before like people thought I was crazy. I'm sure they'd look at me like, what is she doing? Crying. But then it'd show up and I'd be light and airy because I did my work. I was doing my work. And so I think they were like, oh, we like her.
It's really interesting. I just think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I would say to a degree, maybe some of that's kind of happened with me too. Like bigger things have started to happen just the deeper I get into stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. Let's move forward to what you're doing now. So do you recommend that to everybody?
Which part?
Screaming on the freeway.
Yeah.
Oh,
like just, wow.
1,000%. It's the key way. It's the key to getting out of hell.
Oh.
I mean, just this morning, my neighbor came over. She had a little issue last night. I was like, you need to do a fuck you letter and then turn it on yourself and then come talk to me, because I really am not interested in hashing this out with you at all until you do some clearing work. And so she called me up this morning and she's like, I can't even do the fuck you letter. I'm just dead, like whatever. And I was like, I don't want to have a conversation about it. So then she came over and she had actually written her fuck you letter. And then we went through the whole thing. We turned it around. She got an amazing clarity. And now she's on her way.
So you turned it around. So is it that you're pinpointing what is behind the various levels of fuck you? Like what hurt on your part is behind it? You're analyzing or you're dissecting?
We try not to analyze. We want to make it, we want to do our best to be in our right brain in this process, because it's about feelings, not about the intellect. The intellect will block feelings, right? So we want to feel. That's why we do fuck you, because fuck you is powerful. The turnaround is about owning partner, because we have a part in everything that happens.
Is it owning it and saying, I own my part because you did X, Y, and Z? That's not owning it.
No.
Sometimes that's the way kids
recognizing that if vibrationally I brought whatever I perceive you're bringing to me into my world, then I must already have some vibrational resonance to that. I'm doing that too on some level.
Say that again, because I think our listeners will really want to understand that.
Okay. I'd love to share that with them. It's owning the fact that if you're perceiving that someone's doing something to you, the only way it feels like they're doing something to you is you are already on a vibrational level doing that to yourself or others.
Oh, got it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That resonates.
And sometimes you're like, oh, fuck.
Kind of.
We had a bunch of those moments this morning with my neighbor. She was like, but then it's like, it's so empowering, because when we create that awareness, and that's why everyone's our teacher. Well, if everyone's your teacher, let's like use them as your teacher. So the fuck you is a beautiful way to do that. So when you get triggered, and which, I don't know about you, but it happens to me like 1,000 times a day. I run hot, so, I can get triggered up until now. I get triggered. So then I just go after the person, and I always get some sort of brilliant piece of information. When I get that information about what I am doing to myself and potentially others, then I can do something about it. But I can never do anything about somebody else's behavior.
Right.
Ever.
Oh,
Unfortunately.
So as an entrepreneur and helping people to live their dreams and realize their dreams, how does that all work?
You have to ask me another question. I don't know. Well, like what? How does what work?
How does that all work in the business world? How does that all work in our careers? How does that all work? I suppose that applies as well if there's a manager that I'm, or a partner that I'm not, working well with on a project or something like that. So is that, or is there in like having that crystallization that you have these goals, but you don't have a lot of clarity about it. I don't know. Is there an engagement even energetically that happens? Like it's trying to teach you something. If you're not clear about something, I don't know. I'm sort of playing an algorithm here with the mirror of the universe, but how does that all work?
Well, whatever's coming up at the current level of fact, right, is just where we are vibrational. It's just the conditions, right? So we're just, whatever the conditions are, that's what is, right? That's what's showing up. That's what you're seeing around you. And whatever conditions are around you are a perfect thermostatic setting for what's inside of you.
Got it.
Right. So our work is around changing the temperature, changing the thermostat so that our thermostat is in alignment with our vision, not what's happening in our current circumstances. So when we come from the energy of our vision, we're in the energy and we take steps on a regular, repeated basis in the direction of the vision, then we become in alignment with that. And then all of a sudden we see the manifestation. The fruition happens. It comes to fruition because we got into energetic alignment with it. The only reason that we keep repeating the same patterns over and over again is that we're in the same vibrational frequency.
Got it. And there's a lot on the internet.
And that's the good and the bad news.
Yeah.
And it all starts with you. No one has anything to do with that. There's no circumstance outside of yourself.
Well, on the internet, there's a lot of information about manifestation right now. There's a lot of focus on it. There's that sort of thing. And I think what you're saying is, from what I'm understanding, is that there's a lot of information out there, but it's sort of missing this little part that's really the key to it. Because you have to unlock that.
Yeah. And it's the big question is, how the fuck do you do that? How do you do that? How do you really shift your frequency? I mean, we can come from the vision, build this beautiful dream, whatever, like we can do that. And sometimes we have resistance, but we can still do it, right? Create this beautiful vision. And then it's like, well, how do we really shift whatever the paradigm is, the thermostatic setting, right? Mm-hmm. Now that's when in my opinion, not all people teach this, not even my teacher teaches it this way, really. They say like, shift your energy somehow. Well, I like to really be intense about how I shift my energy. That's the emotional processing work. We have to shift our emotion. When I start processing emotionally, my energy shifts. All of a sudden, I'm free, and then I can shift my vibration. Some people say, "Go take a walk, go into the mountains, like go do some earthing." And that works for some people. And it can sometimes work for me. I could go outside, and I live in beautiful Santa Monica. I could go outside and I'm right by the beach and feel really amazing. And then sometimes it requires more than that. And that's that's when I have to go back to my foundation, to my basics. I got to let my feelings have, in my parts. And I also am a practitioner of internal family systems, which talks about this modality of, a parts work, that we have many parts. Anyway, so they all have to have voices. They have to be heard. My highest self has to understand myself. And I don't know. Maybe some people are more complex than others. I would say that I'm probably more on the complex side than the simple side. No judgment on any of it. And that requires me to be really fierce about how am I going to shift my vibration? Sometimes it's I got to take a bat and a pillow and start screaming the fuck yous.
We like that. We could do that any day.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. It's advice I give my daughter all the time. Like, if you please don't yell at your brother, you can yell into a pillow. And it sounds like, I'm right on track.
Absolutely.
I think it's true though. I do a lot of earthing. I do a lot, but I mean, that's great. But yes, sometimes you're sitting there and you're like, you know what? I'm just really annoyed because I haven't been feeling well for 2 weeks and I have the sinus. There's only so much earthing can do for frustration. So it sounds like what you're saying is sometimes some people need to process that differently rather than gently sending it into the earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to go after the feelings. You have to go after that.
Go after them and give them voice, like you said.
Yeah. So my teacher, Mona Miller, she passed away in 2011, but I worked with her for 12 years before she ascended. She's still here. She's just not here she's not in a human body as far as I know. She hasn't shown up. But she always said you have to go after it before it comes after you.
Oh, I love
that. It's either going one direction or the other. And what do you choose? Do you want the shit to come after you, or do you want to go after it? And what's amazing is if you do this work, the processing work, which I've alluded to, we do the work. It's so funny. There's like a heart up here. And for a minute, I thought someone was like hearting me like on Zoom. All of a sudden I was like, oh, I got a heart. And I was like, no, that's my thing. So what's cool about the processing work, if done as prescribed, is that literally you can move through a feeling in like 5 minutes or less. Like it's like this. So like if we have the vigilance, if I have the vigilance to do the work, I literally can go from having like a shit day and feel like my life's going to like implode to being great in less than 5 minutes. And then I can get back to my vision. Then I'm like, oh, what would I love? I would love whatever. And then I get to come from that place. I hope this all makes sense. I know it's a lot of information.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I wanted to talk about feelings for just a second, because I think there's this sense sometimes, because there's a very high level of sensitivity right now. So, sometimes I'm even afraid to say something to someone, even if it's in a grocery store, or I'm very cautious because it feels like for various reasons, people can be very reactionary right now. And I don't know that they know where they're coming from either. But there's because of the levels of sensitivity in general right now, I sometimes feel as though feelings are getting a bad rap. Anger's getting a bad rap. Frustration's getting a bad rap. I mean, so how do we can't dismiss those things. That stuff happens, right?
Well, that's the difference between robots and humans, right?
Oh, let's go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah. So, we're humans. So that's what makes us really special, is we have these things called feelings and these brains, whatever. On some level, I would turn that back onto you, right? Like you're noticing people are really reactionary. You're noticing that this thing about feelings. So I don't know. That's what I'm feeling called to tell you right now, is that I would turn that back onto yourself. So all we can do is handle our own shit. All we can do is keep our eyes on our own plate. So the work is around us leading in the world in a way that we are keeping our side of the street clean, like doing our processing, doing our feelings, allowing ourselves to feel. If we are not connected to our anger, we do not have passion. We have to exercise our anger on a regular and repeated basis, not at people, not at ourselves, but in a form of in some sort of processing, because they sit right next to each other. When I started doing emotional processing work, I was like a crybaby. Okay. I mean, first of all, I didn't cry for like 1,000 years because I have deep trauma that I had to deal with, childhood trauma, capital T trauma. And then I was like completely shut down and, was a party girl. I'm really good at it. And I was an excellent party girl. But like it really buried all of my feelings, right? So then when I started doing it work, it was like when it started coming out, it was like, I mean, I had decades of shit. So I could just get to weepy cry, like I was such a baby, a crybaby. which is great too. I fully encourage crying. I think crying is awesome. Daily crying, great. But when I was starting my processing, I couldn't hold the anger. I would start if I was doing physical processing, hitting the pillow, I'd be mad for a second. Then I'd just be like in a puddle of tears. And I had to learn actually to hold the anger state. I had to, because it's powerful to get connected with that energy. So anger it's good when used properly.
So how do you use that with your clients? How do you use that in realizing dreams in general, whether you're an entrepreneur, woman wanting to change your life, however it is? Talk about your work with people.
Yeah. So I teach my clients how to process, sometimes very directly, and that my teacher Mona wrote a book, and so it's called Invisible Warfare, and I take clients through that book to really learn the process of emotional processing. So I do that typically in groups. I'll teach that book, and that book is like that. It teaches you exactly how to do it. And I, was a student of Mona's for 12 years, and I've been practicing for 25. So I help people with that because it's definitely an avant-garde process. And then when I'm working with people on specifically the dream building work, a lot of times I'll see we're in a process and I'm like, they get stuck energetically because they're having feelings, but they don't know how to process because nowhere teaches anyone how to process that I know of. I mean, I guess you could go to the, what's it called? There's that institute up in Northern California. Anyway, I can't remember the name of it. But very few places, like schools don't teach it, parents don't teach it, like kids don't know, no one knows how to do it. So sometimes I'll stop and be like, sometimes we'll stop the session. I'll be like, we got to process. And so I teach them in that way. Like, I'm going to show you a way that we can shift our energy. And sometimes it's just writing. And sometimes I'll say, go get a bat and a pillow and hit the pillow. So sometimes I do sort of learn how to processing light in the context of specific coaching. And then other coaching, we're just actually learning how to process. That's the whole thing. Does that make sense? Did I answer that question?
It makes sense to me. And it makes sense to me in the sense that I would assume that sometimes in our work, whether it's business or entertainment or having a bakery on the corner that's a sellout, that we sometimes get stymied by whatever's not processed. And our reaction is that, I'm not selling enough cupcakes. I'm not, selling enough shows. I'm not, in my creative process. But where we probably really need to be is in our emotional process, even if it's for 5 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, the world would be such a different place if everyone learned how to process their emotions. The funny thing is I've had a long time cupcake client. I love how you picked that up intuitively. I'm like, I've had a cupcake client for years.
It's one of my favorite things.
Love that. It was like you were getting pings from the universe.
But I bet, is she realizing her dream?
Absolutely.
Right. So in her, just for example, is and not to reveal her or anything, but is it in the emotional processing that her cupcake business has been successful? Probably
parallel. I can't say all of it, but definitely it helps.
It helps. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if I didn't know how to emotionally process, I would never have gotten to where I am today, ever.
Do you think that's always been true, Kristen? Not necessarily for you specifically. Is this moment on this planet calling for that as well? You might have been able to get away with that 20, 30 years ago, not processing, not dealing, not, sort of being shut down and just moving along. Is it different now in the sense our Earth's vibration is different? There are so many different weather factors. Mm-hmm. There are so many other things we're dealing with in general, whether it's COVID or the economy or, massive storms or whatever it might be. Are these times calling for us to process our emotions so we can get past all of this, so we can move on?
I think so. I mean, when you ask that question, it makes me think about the post-war era, like the 1950s in the United States for white people. It was my mom talks about it a lot. It was the good old days. And everyone was just getting hammered and drinking 15 cocktails at lunch. And it was just party, party, party. My mom's story is around her parents literally went out every single night. Everybody was getting rich, not really working that hard, but whatever they did, just having a good time. And I think that only goes so far, right? That only could last It was a very brief period of history, wasn't it? And so I think for sure that we are in a time like this age is requiring it. And there's a separation that is happening, right, between people who are working towards consciously working towards enlightenment and those who are not. I think there will always be duality. I think that's just what it is. But there's a call for sure in that direction. I think it's actually really amazing. I just started a new group. I do group and one-on-one work. I just started a new group. Historically, I've worked with women. Like women's empowerment is my jam because I believe when we empower women, we empower the world. The women are the mothers, literally or figuratively. And just recently I've noticed of all these men that are coming into my practice. And I just started a new group and literally the whole group is men. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. They're men doing this work. And, and I would say they're all masculine. They're men who are in the masculine, more in the masculine energy than the feminine energy. So representing the masculine. And here they are doing this work. It's like, wow. So I think there is this shift that's happening for sure. Because that to me is just incredible. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. Because the tendency was more women doing this work. If you sit in rooms where healing stuff is taking place, if you're on retreat or in classes or whatever, so often it's more women than men for whatever reason that is. But I think that when you see the men coming along, you see that there's really a shift happening.
What's their complaint or what's their concern in general?
I think all of them, probably the initial thought, the knee-jerk reaction to why they're doing the work is they want to figure out what their next level work situation is, And then I think underneath that, they are all striving to be purpose-driven, to really live a life that has meaning. And whether that's, creating that meaning through their work or some other aspect of their lives. I just think many of us, right, especially in the Western culture, the meaning seems to come at first glance through the work. And certainly, that's been put upon men historically on some level. So I don't know that maybe they're not just seeking. It's coming through this veil about work, but
and a veil of frustration. Is that correct? Maybe I think women, we've been sort of forced to figure things out in a way because it's we're not getting where we want to get. And we've been given educations and we've been not given, but we've all earned a lot of different things. So why am I not getting, why is this not happening for me? So then that forces us almost, even, voluntarily, you may want to look on the inside, but sometimes you're forced to look on the inside to figure out, well, what's not working here? So, perhaps that's in part why the more feminine movement has been willing to do that.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's
no choice. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that the men want to level up or want to find a deeper sense of meaning or a deeper sense or get past wherever they're at the moment. And they've been almost forced to turn to what's really going on the inside here. I've done all the work. I've done all, I've gone through all the steps. Why isn't this happening?
Yeah. There's a call for something greater and people are feeling and sensing that on some level.
So back to the Samburu project. At what point did you decide or realize or feel that your next calling was to do this kind of work?
So I mentioned earlier, my dad in 2015, he was dying and he had a cancer diagnosis. He died very quickly from diagnosis to death was 5 weeks, but he was not well before that. So it wasn't like he was in perfect health and that happened, but it was a pretty quick transcendence. And so I had gone, I knew before he had the diagnosis, I knew intuitively that whatever was happening with him, that I had to sense that he was crossing over. I had a conversation with him and I was very clear that he was straddling the two planes. And so I had called my brother and I said, hey, he was in Florida. And I said, I'm going to come for a couple of days. He was like, oh, you don't need to come, whatever. And I said, no, I'm coming. So I made my ticket and I got on the plane the next day or something. And that day we found out that he had this diagnosis. And And then I spent a few days with him and was just like really present to him. Had this like amazing time of just like loving him up. And I had to leave. I had to come back to California. I was doing an event and I had to be there for it. And so I said goodbye to him. And, you know, I didn't know if I'd see him again, but I told him, I promised him that I would be back and that, you know, when the event was over and I settled what I had to settle. And then when I got on the plane, I got hit like a ton of bricks. And I was like, my dad's never leaving that room. Like he's never leaving that hospital. Like this is it for him. He doesn't get to live out any more dreams. Like whatever he had hoped for, whatever, you know, he had dreamed of, like he was like, it was done. Like he wasn't doing anything else. And I realized I was like, you know, I had this incredible fortune of having this dream and, you know, going after it and like having that moment in Kenya, that first day that I was there, you know, with the women and then, you know, completely like, starting this nonprofit organization. And a part of me thought like, oh, this is it. Like I had this one big dream. Like this is the rest of my life. And then I realized I was like, no, I've got a million dreams. I have so many dreams. And so like for me, like the gift of his dying was the gift of me realizing like I get to keep going after my dreams. And so I called my dad when I arrived home in Santa Monica, and he was, you know, the real naysayer, if you remember. And I called him and I just said, you know, Dad, I just want you to be the first person to know I'm leaving the Sunbrew Project. Like I'm complete. And he said to me, Kristen, I am so proud of you. You have done the impossible. What a circle of completion, right? Knowing that he was like, what? And we had our event. It was a walk for water in Hermosa Beach. And I invited my board chair to lunch right after that. And I let her know that I was going to leave the organization. And I didn't leave the organization until about 9 months later. And after that lunch, I went back to Florida and spent a couple of weeks with my dad and was with him when he crossed over. But yeah, it was such a incredible moment of realization for me that like, this is my life and I have so many dreams. We don't just have one dream. We have maybe thousands of dreams, and everybody has the sovereignty to go after those dreams. And I took that, you know, next leap of faith and in allowing the part of me that had another dream, you know, win over the part of me that felt like I needed to stay and continue doing what I was doing.
Wow, Kristen. Very cool. This is so not what I expected this podcast to be about. I think you just gave everybody permission to have dreams and to have multiple dreams, because I feel the same way. I'm like, well, I really want to do this and I really want to have a ranch and I wouldn't mind growing hay because the hay prices are driving me nuts. But, you know, I've got Soul Fam and I've got this documentary. And so, I mean, there's a 3D essence of all of those things, but it's just really empowering to hear you talk about your dad and how these things come full circle, even when you don't think they will.
We just have to keep, you know, following our dreams and taking the steps in those directions. And as my mom says, it all works out if you live long enough.
So what do you hope for your clients to take away from their work? And I know we've spent a lot of time here. I could keep talking all day long. I really could. So what do you hope that your clients will walk away from with the work that you do with them? Is it a continuous process? Is it an always ongoing process, potentially?
Oh, it is ongoing because we are human beings on the green growing edge of becoming. Like as long as we're alive, we're growing. So it is. And what I love for my clients is for them to have be very clear about their dreams and be willing to take steps every single day in service of those dreams and be willing to get out of their comfort zones and face their fears and do it afraid.
Say that again.
And do it afraid.
I think that's a t-shirt. So I have 5,000 other questions, but I think the best thing, I mean, we've already taken a lot of your time and I know you have other things to do. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Probably email me. Send me an email. I would say text message because I really am not a big email person, but that's probably not a good idea. So I'd say email. Yeah, send me an email. And if you would love to have a conversation with me about your dreams, I would love to have a conversation with you. I am equal opportunity when it comes to that. I love to have deep, connected conversations with people.
And you are on your social handles, you are on LinkedIn. Tell me all about that. You have your own website.
LinkedIn, it's at Kristen Kosinski. And I'm on Instagram at Kristen Kosinski. I think probably on Facebook at Kristen Kosinski. So what was the other question? Oh, my website, www.kristenkosinski.com. It's Kristen. I'm a 10. Kosinski, Kosinski. My friend Rose Catherine, I worked with at Paramount, had a hard time spelling my name. And one day she came into my office and she goes, I figured it out. You're a 10. And I was like, yeah.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So in terms of my work, I have one-on-one coaching work. I have groups. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but I am launching the next iteration of my women's mastermind called Power. And I still have a couple of spots in that. It's a year-long program where we dive deep into the principles of dream building and visioning and the science and technology behind that. And then also on the flip side, do the emotional processing work to be in the right vibrational frequency to be able to really get to that next level. Levels.
Really would love if you came back on the podcast sometime and talked further about the frequency of achieving your dreams. I think that's a whole other conversation. Am I wrong?
Sure.
Or at the very least, the frequency of not repelling your dreams by mistake, which I think a lot of people probably fall into. So maybe there's a happy medium in there somewhere. The frequency of being receptive to allies.
I think they're the same thing, right? They're just opposite sides of the coin.
Okay, I love that so much. And as a Gemini, you that makes perfect sense that you always come back to the duality. I love it.
I live in duality. Living with it. Yeah, it's funny. I'll say one last thing. I know we're trying to close out here. When I was talking to my neighbor this morning, they were made to the fuck you letter. We were talking about that and about ego, some stuff that came up about ego. And I was like, yeah, I mean, our goal is to be in spirit with no ego, right? But the only way that we learn to be in that place of centeredness is to be in the pendulum swing of that high ego to low ego. Because if you're in high ego, it's inevitable that you go to low ego, right? And we as humans get to practice that duality to find the center.
That's I know. It's a gift. It's a gift. I feel like that's not only a human gift, but I think that's just part of our process.
I think it's part of the human condition for sure.
Yeah,
because our spiritual part of ourselves does not have to grapple with that.
Finding the center seems like it's just a daily practice, and once you get there, you may swing back in one direction or another. And it seems like our work is never truly done.
It is not, if you're still alive and breathing.
What's the one thing that you want your clients to walk away with, whether they continue to work with you for decades or years or, one single session? What's the one thing you hope that each person will get?
Tools. I think tools to be able to go after it, whatever it is, like go after the life that they would love to have, be more of the person that they feel like they were called to be in this lifetime, and have deep impact in the world in some way.
Yes. Thank you. That was one of mine, actually. So in doing the life assessment, that finally dawned on me. That's exactly what is part of the dream.
That's what you're doing here, right? Putting something out into the world to impact others, inspire others.
All right. Well, we will wrap this up.
And so it is.
Yeah, and so it is. Thank you so much, Kristen. It's very, very amazing conversation.
Well, thank you both for inviting me to be here and share what's on my heart.
It was so
And
inspiring.
Yeah, very inspiring. I hope we can connect again.
I would love that.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Soul Fam podcast. Be sure to tune in to every episode where we dive into a different rabbit hole of the known and unknown to empower you in conscious living and exploration of the greater universe. We hope you leave each episode with a little stardust in your hair and inspiration in your heart. With love from your Soul Fam.